So I'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody can see the cover slide. And I guess as usual, my bad habit is to always make the webinars about the webinars. So in that vein, I'll just say we had these webinars a lot in the spring throughout February, March, April. We were doing what I was calling the qualitative webinars and also those quantitative lab-based data dives. So this is really more the qualitative side. Again, we're doing it here online, so it's more qualitative. All that said, though, because it is midsummer, we're sort of folding it a little bit together. So I don't know if it makes any sense. If it doesn't, I'll just say don't worry about it too much. But there's probably a little more quantitative built into this qualitative presentation, if that makes any sense. My guess is it probably doesn't. If you want to comment whether it does or doesn't, that's great. But anyway, this is, a little bit of both here that we're going to be doing here today. So again, we've been talking about using data to improve program performance. Here's the agenda. So what we've been talking about a lot here during those lab data dives the last few months, during a lot of these webinars as well, is we've been talking about the concept of performance and persistence. So a lot of you I know have been doing this for WIOA for a long time. So when we talk about it from an NRS or federal or WIOA point of view, we're generally talking about the progress we make with pre and post testing. When we're talking about it with NRS, performance usually has to do with gains between pre and post test, as a lot of you know. Persistence has to do with, hanging around long enough to at least complete a pre-test and complete a post-test. So what we've spent a lot of time bouncing around the state here the last few months with these lab trainings is showing the CAEP reports, showing how we can measure, performance in terms of pre-post gains, persistence in terms of completing pre-post. But what we've also started to do is look at alternative ways of measuring this, knowing that we have programs like Adults with Disabilities, Career Tech Ed, and so on, that may not pre and post test. So we've been trying to look at alternative ways, or you might say multiple ways, to measure performance and multiple ways to measure persistence. So we're going to talk a few minutes about the different ways to measure it. We're not going to dwell on that too much. That's what we spend a lot of time dwelling on when we do the lab-based stuff. So we're just going to basically define it, and that's it here. Then we're going to basically figure out how to use it and make two real basic judgments. That is, performance is good or performance is bad. The second judgment would be persistence is good or persistence is bad. And then that allows us to basically place our overall performance in one of four quadrants. Once we kind of figure out that really, really basic judgment on how our data is looking, we can then move on and then start making more decisions at the agency level and at the student level for what we might need to do to move forward to improve and prosper the best way we can. So I'm going to stop here. I'm seeing a lot of feedback here on the chat. It's mostly to do with contact information. So I'm going to stop here for a minute and just make sure everybody hears me. Is it making sense? Are we on the right page? I guess I'll stop rattling off all the cliches, but are we hearing me and understanding me? Is this sounding more or less like what everybody was expecting to get themselves into here? Okay, so far so good. I'm going to wait for a few more. Okay, so we're getting a bunch of yeses creep in here. I haven't seen any voices of dissent. If you have any voices of dissent, you wouldn't hesitate to let me know, would you? I'm sure you wouldn't. Okay, so far so good. So let's go ahead and so anyway, we'll look at agency and student level strategies, and then we'll also look at some resources that should help us improve. So to get our foot in the rail, let's start with the NRS point of view. So that is in federal reporting, and again, I think the majority of you are WIOA 2 NRS agencies. The majority of you have been that way for a long time, so this is what we've been talking about forever. We've been talking about federal, starting with NRS performance. When we talk about NRS performance, you might say the buck starts with Federal Table 4. So sorry, I'm going to keep peppering you with irritating questions. So is everybody here familiar with NRS Federal Table 4, yes or no? Okay, a couple no's, mostly yeses. Okay, so the no, I'm assuming, is probably a non-WIOA. So I'm not going to dwell on it, sorry for the couple no's, but I will at least step out a role here and mention a little more. Is you might say, okay, a couple brand new ones, no problem. So what I'll just say is the feds in their infinite wisdom have basically developed a series of reporting tables that they just call the NRS reporting tables. Bottom line is the NRS tables are the format of the data that California and all other states must report their data to the federal government each year. So there's like 14 different reporting tables. One of the biggies, you might say, is the one on your screen, Table 4. Table 4 is the one the feds call educational gains. That is, Table 4 is the one that measures gains between pre-test and post-test. So another feds in their infinite wisdom issue is the feds in their infinite wisdom have developed 12 federal educational functioning levels. There's 6 on the ABE side and 6 for ESL. You might, if you look at the federal website, you'll see the feds in their infinite wisdom have carefully crafted these levels, across ABE and ESL. That is, they've defined it into things like beginning, intermediate low, intermediate high, advanced, and so on. That is, they've got it divided based on whether the student is a high level or a low level sort of student. So moving into CASAS land, what we've done, just like all other test publishers have done, have adapted our CASAS scores to these levels so that we can be used for federal reporting. Hopefully that gives you enough background on what it is we're talking about. So moving to the table itself, you can see from the slide we've got the 6 ABE levels on top, 6 ESL levels on bottom. Most of you know this, but the pre-test basically qualifies you into the appropriate level of ABE or ESL. That's what gets you in this column B that you can see in the slide. And then based on gains, if the student gets a post-test score equal to or greater than the high end of the level they placed into, then they'll show up on this column E. That is the ones that made an educational functioning level gain. That is, they made enough of a gain between pre-test and post-test to move to the next level. I won't get into too much more detail here, but that's how we measure it for federal reporting. As an aside, most of you are very, very familiar with this because for the last few years we've used the same exact method to calculate California payment points. As an aside, when you look at the CAEP Summary, when we're looking at those pre-post gains, CAEP also uses that exact same method. So I'm going to give this a mercy killing here. I'll just say, is everybody with me, especially a couple of those that said, no, I really don't know what you're talking about when I talk about Table 4. Okay, I see some folks typing, hopefully. Okay, great. All right. I think the ones that said they weren't sure about it, it looks like they're good. So let's go ahead and move on. So we have Table 4. We also have Table 4B. Table 4B, lots like Table 4. The big difference really is Table 4 includes the information for all students who qualify for federal reporting. 4B, on the other hand, has the same educational gains, but it only includes those students that completed both a pre-test and a post-test, so it just has a more limited number of students that it allows to get on this table. In TE, we have what's called the NRS Persister Report. The Persister Report simply compares those Table 4 results for 4B. Again, we just talked about how 4 and 4B measure the same thing. They're looking at pre-post gains. The difference is simply in who qualifies. So the Persister compares that. So all it's really doing is looking at the number who qualify for Table 4, measure it up against the number who qualify for 4B. That will give us that Persister percentage of persister you can see in column D of this report. That is, of those who qualify for Table 4, what percentage qualify for 4B. So that will give us a percentage of each level. All that percentage means is of everyone who qualifies for federal reporting, what percentage of those students completed a pre-test and a post-test. We use this to measure persistence because we're basically suggesting, at each of these 12 federal levels, how many of the students, quote unquote, persisted long enough to at least complete a pre-test and complete a post-test. It gives us our percentage of persister at each level. So to tie it up all neatly in a bow, this is what we're doing on the federal reporting side of things, where we're looking at the federal reporting and figuring out, okay, how many students stick around enough to get a pre and post. So sorry, I'm going to keep being a pest here. Does that too also make sense? Do we understand the federal reporting or NRS version of how we would measure persistence? Again, for federal reporting, it really is all about who completes a pre and post. Okay, everybody's saying yes, so we'll move on. So, again, this just reiterates what I said. You've got column C on this report, those who qualify for 4B divided by column B, those who qualify for Table 4, giving us that percentage of persister at each level. That's just what I mentioned a minute ago. So now we're moving on to the CAEP Summary. Again, this is a CAEP training, so we're necessarily focusing on CAEP data. Again, most of you are familiar with this. We've talked a lot over the last few months about the 3 sections of the report: pre-post to the left, outcomes in the middle, services to the right. Services, pretty much everybody qualifies. Outcomes, you need those basic, you need to meet those basic requirements like demographics and 12 hours. The pre-post section to the left requires everything you need in that middle outcome section, but I like to say the bar is even a little bit higher because it requires the 12 hours, it requires the demographics, it requires everything you need for this middle outcome section, and in addition, it requires the qualifying pre-test, or that information related to pre and post testing, with the bottom line reason, of course, being that that left-hand section is the part of the report that pertains to pre and post testing. So a lot of you have probably heard me say high bar to the left, middle bar in the middle, low bar to the right, meaning we've set the bar at 3 different levels. That means we have 3 different sets of criteria we establish to measure who qualifies for each section of the report. Okay, so with that, what we've been doing here since about the beginning of 2019 is we've been looking at different ways to measure persistence in CAEP. Again, in WIOA, we don't really worry about this, quite frankly. Is this the case? I guess I need a little more on what you mean by community college-based adult ed. I mean yes. If you're WIOA funded, yes. If you're not WIOA funded, no. I guess I'll just say whether you're a college really doesn't matter that way. What matters is whether you're WIOA funded. Colleges, just like adult schools, some are funded for WIOA, others are not. If there's more to your question that I'm missing, I guess fill in the blanks on the question, I guess. So anyway, back to the slide, when we're talking about CAEP, again, for WIOA, we're really just talking about pre-post. That's how we would talk about it for federal reporting. But for the state level CAEP reporting, we know that for a lot of our students, the way the feds do it makes a lot of sense. But for some students, that is those who are in career tech ed or K-12 success or whatever, there's some of those programs that don't necessarily require pre and post testing. So for those students, we're looking for alternative ways of measuring persistence. So here's just a quick laundry list. We're going to get into it a little bit, but the direct correlation to NRS, I'll back up just so you can see, is this left-hand section, again, deals with pre-post test gains, so we can use that section of the CAEP Summary to measure how many students make gains as well as how many get a pre and post using that section, just like we can do with Table 4 and 4B. Obviously, we can match what the NRS does pretty well. But then we've also looked at some alternatives, that is, looking at those. So that second bullet is basically looking at everybody who qualifies for CAEP at all. That is, they get on the meter, you know, they have some kind of service or some kind of ID or whatever. Of those who have who show up at all on the report, how many enroll in one of those 7 official CAEP programs and get at least 1 hour of instruction. So that would be one way where we're basically saying, okay, we get students that come in for counseling, maybe they come in for orientation or for a 1 hour training or whatever. They come in basically to kick the tires at our agency and figure out whether it's for them. So we're measuring persistence by saying, of those that kick the tires, what percentage basically take the bait and enroll with you and enroll in one of your official programs in a class and do that to where they at least get that 1 hour of instruction. Taking it to the next level, another thing we can do is, of those who have program enrollment, that is, of those who enroll in one of the 7 CAEP programs, those who would get at least 1 hour of instruction, of those that get at least 1 hour of instruction, how many stick around long enough to get 12 hours of instruction? So we say 12 hours of instruction because 12 hours is what's qualified to earn outcomes. It's what's required to earn pre-post outcomes. And oh, by the way, that's also what the feds require to qualify for NRS reporting. So you might say, for many different reasons, 12 hours is the magic number. So third bullet, of those who get enrollment and get at least 1 hour, how many stick around long enough for 12 hours? And then the final one might be a little more performance than persistence, but we're basically looking at the middle section of the report and saying, of those who have the 12 hours of instruction and qualify for all those outcomes under CAEP, how many achieve at least one outcome? We're not really caring which outcome it is. It could be employment, transitions, pre-post, whatever. But of those who qualify for the outcomes, how many successfully achieve at least one outcome? So I'll just pause here. That was a huge mouthful on the slide, but does everybody still follow me, even though I kind of rambled on and on and on right there? Okay, so that's everybody's story, and they're sticking to it. Okay, great. We'll keep moving then. Okay, so, looking at persistence in CAEP, again, here's kind of the CAEP way for pre-post gains. So here's again, we've got to kind of go quick here. You know, we've had these data dive webinars to kind of dig into it. So sorry if I'm glossing over some details, but this is the left-hand section of the CAEP Summary. So this is what has pre and post test results. So I've just blown it up here to show the programs to which that pertains. So we're looking at ESL, ABE, and ASE. So we've got the 3 columns here in that literacy gain section. Column B shows how many enrolled in each of these programs. Column C shows, of those who enrolled, how many had a pre-post pair. Column D shows, of all of those, how many made enough of a gain between pre and post to make that level gain on the federal charts, like we explained right there at the beginning when we described Federal Table 4. So we can use, this CAEP Summary to get the same information as we would from Table 4 and 4B. You could do it in different ways. You could compare that column B with column C, and that would show us, of the enrollees in each program, how many had a pre-post pair. That would be the way we would measure persistence. That would be the way to see how many persisted and had a pre-post. Or we could compare column B with column D to see the gain. That would be how we would measure performance. That is, we're not just concerned with who has tests, but we're more concerned with who has tests and who actually made the gain. So if we just play around with these columns B, C, and D on the CAEP Summary, we can measure persistence and performance in these CAEP programs in much the same way that Table 4 and 4B and the Persister does with NRS reporting. Okay, so this is just reiterating what I'm saying. Column C divided by column B gives us our persistence rate. We can do it as an agency overall, or we can certainly do it program by program. So you would just take that number, so you'd go 28 divided by 72, which would be approximately 35%, I believe. So you would just take column C divided by column B, and that would be your rate. I give you a rule of thumb for persistence. I'm saying 70%. Is that absolute? Not at all. But 70% is the number I give you here. 70% is the number I give you here, because at the state level, at least in terms of WIOA reporting, we've been around 70% now for 5 or 6 years. So 70% isn't the exact answer, but if you use 70% just as a rule of thumb, that's a good way to kind of do these calculations and decide, are you doing okay or not okay? If you're 70% or better, you can probably say okay. If not, then that probably suggests you need to make some improvement. Okay, going back to this section, you can also, compare D to column B. That would give you your performance. And then you can also, you can basically look at D divided by C. That would be a way to basically mimic table 4B. I don't really have a rule of thumb for performance. I'll just say for performance, when you look at that pattern, there's a lot of variation between ABE and ESL. There's also a lot of variation from instructional level to instructional level. So I gotta say that depends, but I'll just say you can also measure these percentages for performance just like you can persistence. So anyway, at the end of the day, you can make those basic judgments whether you're using the NRS tables or the CAEP reports and make that snap decision on whether your performance is high or low, and also whether your persistence is high or low. We're keeping it super, super simple for this qualitative presentation here, but bottom line, you're going to be good or bad in performance, you're going to be good or bad in persistence. So keeping it super simple, that means everybody is going to necessarily fall in one of these 4 quadrants. That is performance high or low, persistence high or low, and you'll file accordingly. Obviously, for the sake of this webinar, we're talking more about these 2 over here in the left-hand side, where we're looking at the low performance, where you're going to have low performance accompanied with also low persistence, or in some cases, you might have low performance where persistence is actually pretty good. So just kind of bouncing around here, obviously one way you could fall is your performance and persistence could also be good. If so, that's great. If so, maybe you don't need to be here because you've already got it mastered. You might say, hey, congratulations there. Potentially, very, very, very unlikely, but your performance could be good and your persistence not so much. Gotta say, if you're falling in this lower right quadrant, you're in a very, 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 very unusual situation. Doesn't happen that often. We'll just say, hey, you should at least make sure you get everybody pre and post tested. Not too much more to say there. Moving over to that lower left, if your performance is low and your persistence is also low, well then we're saying, yeah, there's a lot of things that could be a problem, but one thing that's definitely a problem is your persistence is low, so that's definitely suggesting that you need help with your pre and post testing. So, the thing you really need to do first in that equation is you need to go ahead and clean up your data. So some of it is data cleanup, fixing demographics and hours and so on. Some of that is going to be making sure that dutifully making sure that all your students have done the pre-test and the post-test. You may need to do some other issues on instruction as well, but there's no reason to deal with that because you really need to deal with data cleanup and getting everybody tested first before you really move forward with anything else. The final part of the quadrant is in the upper right. That is, your performance is low, but your performing low even though your persistence is good. So in this case, what we're saying is you need to look at classroom issues. You could potentially do data cleanup. You could potentially make sure everybody gets pre and post tested. If you did so, that would probably be good, but that would not necessarily be the solution here, because in this example, your persistence already is looking good. So if your persistence is already looking good, well then by definition, you must already be doing pretty well in terms of data cleanliness. You must also be doing pretty well in terms of getting students pre and post tested. So you could do that, but that would not be the recommendation based on if this is where you fit, we already know you're doing okay in those areas. However, if you're in this area, your performance is low, so you still do need to improve. Data cleanup and testing isn't going to help much, so bottom line is you need to look at the classroom. That could be teacher observations. It could be looking at competency and content standard reports and TE. It could be lesson planning materials. It obviously could be lots and lots of different things, but it all relates to figuring out different ways to improve things in the classroom. So we've worked our way around the horn. Another chance to check in. Everything still making sense? Yes or no? Okay, everybody's insisting on yes. So that's your story and you're sticking to it. I'll move on. So what if your persistence rates are average or below average, like I just said? Then yeah, the issue is you need to come up with some kind of game plan to get everybody pre and post tested. So we said the qualitative this time. So by qualitative, that means we bring up a lot of qualitative suggestions. So prepare yourself for laundry list madness. We're going to be going over lots of laundry lists here over the next several minutes. So we have ways of improving persistence. The way we break it down for this presentation is we look at some student level suggestions and some agency level suggestions. So at the student level, we're starting with student level attendance. So obviously we need to look at attendance. If you're looking at some of those alternative methods, that attendance might directly fit into the equation. If we look at pre and post testing, maybe not so much, but we know that attendance is going to have a huge impact on getting everybody tested. A lot of times if we don't do well getting people pre and post tested, poor attendance is a big reason why you may not get everybody pre and post tested. So some suggestions might be follow up once students miss 3 or more days. That clear line of communication between teacher and students, very important. Make sure students let the teacher know if they're leaving the class, if they're moving to a different class, whatever. I think the long story short here is it relates to communication between the teacher and the student. A lot of these suggestions, you might say, are without question a little bit unfair to the teacher because it puts a lot of onus on that teacher. Bottom line is that that teacher kind of has to shoulder all of this communication responsibility. It really isn't fair, but it's at the same time necessary. What you might say is, if the student hears from the administrator or the data person, most likely that's going to mean nothing to the student at all. But if the student hears from that teacher, the student will generally go to the end of the earth for their teacher. So necessarily it does fall on the teacher to do this communication with the students, because 20, 30 years of data doesn't lie. You might say the student tends to listen to their teacher way more than they will with any other staff at your agency. For that reason, the burden does tend to fall at the teacher level. We'll be looking at that. Yeah, good question. Lots of slides to follow on date and time. I'll just say stand by for that. Sticking with student attendance, though, make sure you've got a flexible schedule. Sometimes students, have poor attendance because it's on them, but sometimes their poor attendance is on you. If you're not flexible, it's definitely more on you than them. If you've got lots of students with attendance issues, then it probably has less to do with you fixing the students students and more with you fixing you and rescheduling your classes and so on so students are better able to attend. If those who don't enroll in class, look for that availability, maybe put it at different dates and times so more students will enroll, more students will hang in there. Sometimes that might mean add more distance learning or independent study, having more have more classes in a computer lab or in a workshop environment or in places that might have more tangible meaning to the students who are enrolled. More student strategies, obviously a lot with pre-post. Establishing rewards is a really good idea. I'll just say, 12, 15 years of doing this, I've seen lots and lots of agencies come up with these little reward plans. Usually the rewards agencies provide are very, very, very minor, but even though the rewards are very low dollar value and seemingly very low significance, they still seem to uphold a lot of significance to the student. So from my perspective, you literally can't go too low. You can come up with stuff that seems really menial and it still seems to do a good job motivating students. Another issue is student test anxiety. This affects some students more than others, but if you have students that hate testing, that get nervous when they go in the computer lab, definitely help practice. Some agencies feel like CASAS frowns on practicing test taking. That's definitely wrong. We at CASAS encourage you to practice test taking. Where the CASAS party line sometimes gets in the way is we definitely say, don't use actual tests. Use our practice test items. We have practice test items on the website for reading, math, and listening. We definitely encourage you to help students practice with test-taking skills. The key, though, is to always use practice test items. Never, 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 never use actual test items. That would be teaching to the test. Then you can use those reports. Look at reports like learning gains and student gains or test summary. We talked about there's some reports that use competencies and content standards. For this purpose, we're really looking at more basic level reports that don't get into those details, that simply provide that roster format of all the students and who's completed a pre and who's completed a post. So you can use those kind of reports to fit in and figure out all that kind of information. Then, of course, aligning assessment with instruction, that has more to do with the other piece when your performance is low but your persistence is good and you need to start getting into the classroom. But obviously from a student motivation standpoint, if your classroom material doesn't align with what's supposed to be taught, usually that will have an adverse effect on student ambition and motivation and so on. Okay, looking at more agency level strategies where, again, communication is key. In this case, we're talking less between teacher and student and just overall with your management team. What I'll do is kind of knock here and say, hint, 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 'tis the season. We're at the beginning of the program year right now. So right here, right now is very much the time of year when you absolutely should be doing this, when quite frankly you absolutely must be doing this, where you should be getting together with your management team and plan out for the year how it is that you're going to approach testing, how it is you're going to approach things like scheduling classes and instructional hours and all that sort of stuff. So figure out when to schedule classes, figure out, what assessments you're going to administer for each program, set up those orientation dates and testing dates, and then make sure you have a very clearly spelled out line of responsibilities, which staff are involved and exactly which duties, which staff are responsible. The more detail you have, generally speaking, the overwhelmingly more effective you're going to be in these cases. So again, everybody needs to know exactly what they need to do. testing staff, administrators, teachers, administrators, and of course, you know, the students themselves as well. Everybody needs to know this. And I'll just say the level of detail is important. The agencies that do well with this are setting their testing schedule now, not later, and mapping it out for the whole program year. So ideally now or soon from now, you're not only going to know when you're doing your pre-testing for the fall, you'll have all your testing dates for the fall spelled out, and you'll pretty much have your spring dates spelled out too. And when the students come in, they'll know what all those dates will be as well. Okay, so then again, what I just said, plan out the testing dates, you know, make up days for students who are absent, you know, make those contingencies for students that are mysteriously absent from testing and or leave program early. And then a good thing is to build that into orientation, make sure students know when to test, know why it's so important. Most of you say, yeah, you understand that a lot of students don't care much for testing. Totally understandable why, but that it's important for your agency and your agency's funding and so on to do it. So make sure students are aware of that. Usually when students are aware of that, they are typically a lot more cooperative. Okay, and then what I'll just say is all the things I've mentioned right here, all the things I've mentioned up to this point are things that most agencies perform very well. This one, I've got to say, most agencies don't perform very well. That is, all of these best practices you do, but a lot of agencies don't do well on thoroughly documenting these best practices in their local assessment policy. This is the 'tis the season part that I did the knock on wood for, is again, this time of year, that is the beginning of the program year, is when you need to revisit and revise your agency's local assessment policy. So we have that statewide policy that provides all the ins and outs related to pre and post testing from the state level, and provides all the state level do's and don'ts and requirements for testing for all of us. One big thing that state policy requires is that all local agencies must develop its own local assessment policy and then revise it at the beginning of the program year. So you need to go ahead and do that. I say 'tis the season because of course we're at the beginning of the program year now. So now is when you should start doing that. Again, the more individual level responsibility your local policy provides, typically the better and more effective your policy is going to be. So make sure you've got a procedure for what happens with, you know, doing the testing, how it relates to placing students into program and class, specify times for testing, designate individual accountability. If you're doing e-testing, a lot of times that's easy. You just designate those staff who are the coordinators and proctors. If you do pencil paper testing, you don't really have to do proctor and coordinator, but we definitely say if you're pencil paper testing, approach it as if you have people who are proctors and coordinators and assign those people the same types of responsibilities that the e-test agencies would to proctors and coordinators. And then another big piece, and this is something that where a lot of agencies fail, make sure that local policy addresses hard to reach students. What I mean by that is some certain kinds of students are admittedly a little harder to get pre and post tested. So students with disabilities, students who are in distance learning programs, high school recovery, independent study, those who are maybe in remote sites like the church basements or elementary school cafeterias, that is, certain types of students for a variety of reasons a lot of times are harder to reach. So one way to do a better job with those hard to reach students, put that in your policy, spell out exactly what procedures you need to follow and what your students need to follow in order to make sure they get tested just like everybody else. Okay, more agency level strategies, use the data reports, identify students. So I'm gonna play musical chairs with you here. So looking back at the report, sorry, I'm going way back, but looking at this CAEP report, for example, you can see in this example, at least in terms of persistence, this is just a made up example, but you look at high school diploma, high school equivalency, we're not doing that well in those areas, but if you compare that to how we're doing in ABE and ESL, not as bad. So at this specific agency, you can see our ESL program is hurting the most. Our ABE is second worst. Our ASE, not great either, but it's a lot better when compared to ESL or ABE. So if you're looking at CAEP reports, you can determine strong programs and weak programs. If you're looking at NRS, you can do the same things for those NRS levels. But again, the more detail you can provide here, the better. Sorry, I'm monkeying around with this here. I think here's where we were. So again, generally whether your performance is good or bad. Generally whether your persistence is good or bad. You need to take that next step and identify programs that look good, identify programs that have especially weak, and then the same thing if you're NRS, look for those specific levels. Hey, in ESL, our low levels of ESL are really, really good, but once we get to the higher levels, for whatever reason, they don't do pre and post testing, so you want to get to that level of detail so you can be as specific as possible when you're targeting groups of students to get tested. Verify that you're meeting state and federal requirements, match modality levels, and so on. And then again, you can also target those specific levels of students and figure out which programs and which classes you may really need to provide that focus. Okay, so we're transitioning here a little bit. I'll give a sanity check here. Does everybody follow this? I said we were entering laundry list madness. Is everybody following all these laundry lists, or are you getting sick of these laundry lists already? Okay, again, everybody's story and they're sticking to it. So here we go. So all of those, again, we provided some student level examples and some agency levels examples when persistence and performance are both weak. So here's our second scenario where in this case our persistence is actually pretty good, but for whatever reason our performance is still low. So in this case, if we've already determined that our persistence is pretty good, will working on getting everybody pre and post tested have a big impact on our performance or a small impact? What do you think will happen if we do that when we know our persistence is already pretty good? Okay, somebody's trying it. Okay, so you've got the right answer. Okay, so BG is jumping to my next question, but for what it's worth, yes, BG, you've got my second question correct. But my first question was, if you're doing what we talked about firsthand, where we're getting everybody tested, if we already know our persistence is pretty good, is a strategy where we're getting all our students tested, is that going to have a big impact on our performance or a small impact on our performance? Small. Okay, very good. It's going to have a small. So small is the correct answer. Why is it that small impact is the correct answer? A few of you look like you're typing the first question. So we know that that's not going to do much. Why do we know off the bat that getting everybody pre and post tested, it'll do a lot in our first scenario, but it's not going to do much at all in our second scenario? Why is that the case? Okay, a couple are typing. I need to. That's right. They're already getting paired scores. That's right. So they already have paired scores. So if we do a full court press to get more paired scores, obviously that helps us like not at all, because that mission is already accomplished. We don't need to do a full court press for a mission in which we're already accomplishing, right? But we know our performance is low. So I'll get to the second question, which you've already answered, which is knowing that data cleanup isn't going to do much good, knowing that getting everybody pre and post tested isn't going to do much good, what can we do? Well, I'll remove suspense because you already have done that for me. You know, that is, we need to look at the instructional side. So admittedly, that's a loosey-goosey answer because that means so many things. Maybe it's teacher observations, maybe it's TE competency reports, maybe it's content standard reports, maybe it's looking and making changes to the curriculum materials and lesson planning materials. Maybe it's a lot of things, but again, you need to look at that instructional side. So again, it looks like a lot of you have had that right answer, so we'll move on. So again, if persistence is low, this instruction part might be relevant, but we're going to go for the low-hanging fruit first, that is data cleanup, pre and post testing, get the fundamentals out of the way first. If we know we have the fundamentals out of the way and our performance is still lacking, now we need to take it to the next level and figure out a way to improve instruction. So just like we did with that first scenario, we've got more laundry list madness here, student level examples and agency levels for improving that side of performance. So at the student level, we look at goals. I like to dwell on this a little bit because a lot of you have heard me over the last couple years say goals are not required. They haven't been required for several years. I can attest that a lot of you get quite upset with me when I say that as well. A lot of you get quite upset with me when I say goals aren't required because you can't really believe that the state and feds would be so callous as to dismiss goals. And what I would just say is the state does not dismiss goals, the feds don't either. It's just that they're not required for any of our accountability requirements. We would still say goals are helpful, and here's why, is the better job you do with assigning student goals and putting as much focus as possible, generally speaking, the more engaged the student will be. The more engaged the student will be, the better they'll perform in class, the better they'll do on the tests, and so on. So you want to make sure that all the things you're doing in class align to what the students actually want you to do. If you don't do what the student wants you to do, you can huff and puff all you want. They're not going to pay attention. You're not going to get the results from your students you want. Align the materials with the local and statewide priorities. So similarly, once you know what the students want, once you know what you need to do locally and statewide in order to meet those goals, make sure all the things you're doing in the classroom align to those local and statewide priorities. Depending on what you're doing, would kind of determine the extent to which you need to do that. But either way, you need to make sure that it all aligns with how students are going to get into college or get jobs or get more involved in the community or do whatever it is you've determined locally as the top priority with your adult education programs in your region. And then also compare level with the assigned class. This has to do with locators and appraisals. When you're starting with each student, you really want to do that locator or appraisal. If you blow off that step, generally speaking, your testing results will be lousy. It will basically be lousy right at the outset because you won't be placing students correctly. If you place students incorrectly, highly likely you're going to do lousy across the board in terms of pre-post results. Then expectations, this is like the first bullet. Make sure that what students are signing up for is what they're actually getting in class and that there's a match there. Recognition, another big piece. Like we said, on the other side of it, I've seen agencies have really, really low level, rewards, and it still seems to do a really, really good job of motivating students. The more recognition you can give students, the better, and don't worry about it being, seemingly not so meaningful, is why I make such a fuss about the low value rewards. I've seen low value rewards have a really big stock from a student perspective. It's usually not what you're giving the student that matters. It's the fact that you're recognizing the student in the first place. Test taking skills, like we said, make sure that students are comfortable, make sure instruction is individualized. You've got your class lesson plans, but different students are going to perform at different rates. You need to make sure that that's, adjusted accordingly. Do lots of review. Then we'll just say at the student level in any class, you're going to have some really high-performing students and some lower-performing students. So look at those students who are performing the highest, and then figure out what it is that's making them tick. Figure out what those practices are of your high-performing students, and to the best extent possible, share those practices with your other students that are maybe not doing quite as well. Looking at agency level, look at agency-wide performance. You can drill down by class, by level, by program. So that means those TE instructional reports, specifically the competency reports and the content standard reports. Most of you probably do that by class. So you can give those class level reports to each teacher that will give a specific breakdown on specific areas in which that class is doing well versus other areas where that class is doing not so well. Obviously, the cookie cutter model a lot of you have heard is identify the areas in which the class is not doing well and address some steps to really hone in on those specifically identified areas. Hours of instruction, another big thing. We say 70 to 100 hours of instruction. If you're not giving the number of hours in between pre and post, really, really good chance your students are not performing as well. If you cut corners there, really good chance you're probably doing so with adverse effect on your pre and post results. Feedback, very important. Make sure your teachers have opportunity to give you, the administrators, feedback. Make sure your students have opportunity to give teachers feedback as well as you feedback. Make sure teachers and students have that pipeline where they can tell you what's working and what's not working. Then evaluate by top performers. We set it by student, by class, and by teacher. That's also true. In any school, you're going to have some classes that are doing very, very well, others that are not doing well. So look at those classes that are your best performing classes. Figure out what that teacher is doing well and what those students are doing well. Have those other teachers, other classes, other students mimic what the top performing classes are already doing. Okay, and then just like we talked about with the other side of it, all of these things I'm talking about, most agencies are doing well. Here's the area where it's maybe, not as well from a statewide perspective, is aligning it to your local and statewide priorities. I'd say in recent years, agencies are doing a little better with this because of the CAEP Consortia. It's required you to get together with all of your partner agencies and kind of look at it from a regional perspective than just an agency perspective. But you want to be able to look at things like, the demographics and, economics of your specific students. Look at your local economy. Look at what kind of jobs your local region has. Look at things like transportation and housing. Look at what's going on with all the different government issues in your community and so on. But that is, some of you live in affluent communities, some of you live in poorer communities, some of you are urban, some of you are rural, etc., etc., etc. So the specific things you're doing at your college or your school should on some level match what's going on in that big bad world right there outside your doorstep. Make sure that your career programs, your college programs, and so on match what students in your local region need to do. Okay, so that was a big mouthful. So any questions on all those laundry lists, yes or no? Okay. All right, so everybody seems like you're okay, so we'll move on. So finally, and this is really just an excuse to talk resources, the light is at the end of the tunnel here, where what if your persistence and performance both need to improve? That's going to be a common scenario. So we've kind of outlined it. I would just say that if you're, back to if you're low in both, the short answer is start with the fundamentals, data cleanup, pre and post testing, do the fundamentals first, and then dig into instruction second. What we're also saying is another first step is look at resources. There are resources at the state, local, and student levels to help with all this stuff. So here, again, we're shouting out, here's all the wonderful resources that are available. So moving on, first off, we're doing a CAEP training, so of course we better mention the CAEP website. So here's the link, again, resources for students, educators, and administrators, success stories at the student and agency level, practices with promise, and so on, all kinds of things you can find on the TAP website. There's also, you're hearing from CASAS, so you're necessarily going to have me talk about the CASAS website. So we have a feature called Quick Search, where once you've identified things from areas like content standard and competency reports, you can type in content standards or competencies that might be a problem at your agency or in your class. You can use CASAS Quick Search and find materials that address that specific competency or content standard. So that's one thing you could do. We've got that website for EL Civics that a lot of you know. That aligns a lot of the EL Civics objectives with different instructional ideas. I understand some of you are not EL Civics, some of you are not WIOA, but I dare say most of you probably do ESL at some level. I'll just say as long as you do ESL at all, 100% chance that there's something on the EL Civics website that would probably help you. Another thing we have on our website is we've got a section that aligns our CASAS content standards with Common Core standards. I'm sure you've all heard about Common Core. It's been a big issue now for almost 10 years. Some of you love it, some of you loathe it. Bottom line is, it is the direction everything's headed. So I'll just say our biased opinion at CASAS is that Common Core standards look and feel an awful lot like our CASAS content standards. We say it looks like us and not the other way around, because we have had our CASAS content standards around longer than Common Core standards, but either way, there is a crosswalk document that basically correlates our content standards with Common Core standards. The reason why I present that as an advantage is a lot of you are saying, that your superintendent or your dean is requiring you to get more into Common Core. One way that you can show proof of that is run those content standard reports in TE. Then you can compare it to that crosswalk to show Common Core areas of strength and Common Core areas of need at your agency or program. That's another good way to potentially tackle instruction and move forward with that. Then again, I mentioned TE instructional reports. That's under the reports test results menu. Lots of different reports there you can use, but again, I'll just reiterate those competency reports and content standard reports, the ones you're most likely going to want to use. Okay, so moving along, back to the CAEP website. Again, lots of great resources there. Here's a screenshot of our quick search feature. Again, we're here on this PowerPoint. We're running out of time, but I'll just say on our website, you go to Product Overviews and then select Curriculum Management and Instruction. That's the section of our website that has Quick Search. That's also, by the way, the section of our website that has all of those other instructional related resources, more information on competencies, content standards, practice test items, and so on. Our EL Civics website, here's that screenshot. It obviously focuses on EL Civics and COAPs, but I'll just say overall, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of resources related to ESL instruction. Here's an example of that crosswalk where, again, we can align our content standards to Common Core. Then here's just a bunch of miscellaneous resources. We have our CASAS data portal. A lot of you have used that. That has some 12 or 13 years worth of data, of WIOA data results. That's another resource on our website, probably more data-oriented than instruction, but certainly a really good resource. If you're looking at that alignment to your local area or your regional priorities, we could go on and on and on and on and on about that. I always start with the American Community Survey. That's a website that the U.S. Census has. Pretty much everything on earth you'd ever want to know and more about the demographics, about the economics, about, all of those different, statistical categories in your region. You can find that in the American Community Survey. All that data you ever need to know if you don't know what the demographics are in your region, if you don't know whether the economy is good or bad, you can find all that out and more by going to that American Community Survey website. Promising practices, we have that on CASAS. It's a little dated now. We haven't really had that in a while, but we still do have lots of resources there. And then lots of data management reports you can use to make sure you've got all your data present and so on. Here's our data portal again. This is a training in and of itself, but it has all kinds of WIOA 2 results statewide by region and by agency. It goes all the way back to the 04-05 program year. Here are some basic directions on how to use it. Go to our California Accountability section of the website, and that will basically give you, what it is, that section to get to the data portal. And again, you can compare data results by agency, by region, as well as several other ways. Compare it to the state goals and the state averages. Okay, you can do this. You can look at performance rates on the data portal. You can do the same thing for persistence. It's the same web application. There are actually two different sections of the data portal, one that allows you to compare performance, the other that allows you to do the exact same thing with persistence. Okay, and then here's some exercises. We're not going to do that now, but we do have some, whoops, I missed, where did I go? Back to this page. So anyway, we've got some examples here that we don't have time to do, but we'll go ahead and give this a killing now. Anybody with any questions here before we finish up? Okay, and I don't think this affected you, but I'll just say I unwittingly clicked a bunch of buttons here that I didn't really mean to click. Veronica, I guess I'll let you intervene. Hopefully I didn't have everybody change. Oh, I have to 1:30. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do questions then. I'm basically done. I thought I had an hour. I kind of went a little too fast. I guess I'll just say, though, if we don't have questions, we'll go ahead and finish up. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'll just say any questions. I don't really want to backtrack that much. I did think I needed to get this done in an hour. I would have stopped to smell the coffee, I guess, if I knew I had longer, but hopefully that was fine. I'll wait. I'll stay online here for another 5 minutes or so. Yes, service hours will not count this year. You should still record services, but those hours don't really count. If you don't want to record those hours, there's definitely no need to do that anymore. I'll stay online here for a few more minutes in case anybody has any questions. Don't want to shortchange anybody. I'm not sure what you mean. I assume that's a follow-up to your other question page, but I don't know what you mean by that comment at all. Okay, Ryan, your question, SSID. So I'm pretty sure, Ryan, because you're one of my meeting regulars, you might say you were probably in the ones we did at the end of the year where we had that memo from CDE and CalPads that came out toward the end of 1819 that kind of said stand by to stand by. Ryan, I'm going to wait for you specifically to kind of roger out that you know what I'm talking about. Right, there's no update like Diana said, right? Okay, you're typing. Right, so I'll just say sometime in June, I forget the date, but sometime in June they did a follow-up memo that basically just said continue to stand by to stand by. They're still looking at the issue at the state level. The long story short is I remember sitting with you when they did that webinar in April. What I'll just say is a lot of people watching that kind of were wondering if that was really going to work. I'll just say at the state level, they were wondering the exact same things. They have a lot of reservations, so they basically hit the drawing board. I do not know what the final answer will be, but what they've been entertaining in the last few weeks is they may end up not using SSID. They may end up coming up with something different for adult ed. To be exceedingly clear, that's not necessarily what they've said officially. They're still working on it. They're still making this decision, but I'll just say I'm using that to say all options are still on the table, so don't worry about putting in SSID for now. The state is still reviewing and kind of deciding what they want to do, when they want to do it, if they want to do it. Okay, I'll go back to you. Okay, those hours. Well, they won't count now. I mean, again, the issue is, right, again, it's not an hour of instruction. It might count toward other things. It's not that it doesn't matter, but when we're talking about hours of instruction, no, it won't count. I think the way to think about it is it needs to pertain to those CAEP instructional areas. So to be clear, the reason why service hours don't count has nothing to do with service delivery. So I'll go out of my way to say at both the state level and the federal level, you're strongly encouraged to provide alternate means of service delivery. So by saying classroom instructional hours, that doesn't mean it all has to come from the classroom. If you're doing distance learning or you're doing independent study, or obviously you want to do CTE in a lab or in the workshop or whatever, all of those things are not only okay, they're strongly, strongly, strongly encouraged. But bottom line is, when you're talking about hours of instruction, they should relate to that instructional program. If you're just doing a general, what are your priorities, or you're doing fiscal counseling or whatever, it's not that that doesn't matter, that's great, but it doesn't really relate specifically to ABE or ESL or Career Tech Ed. That's the issue at the state and federal level. I'll just say different agencies have different ways of applying it, and yes, that very, very much factors into why service hours don't count. Right, so Diana's bringing up, we've brought this up at the superficial level. Neil and I did a presentation at the CASAS Institute. We didn't get into details, but we announced what we just said. I would just say, yeah, to Diana's point, we have set up a little training schedule starting in early August at Mount Diablo. Throughout August, September, October, we will be doing regional training. Once we get into those regional trainings, we'll be a little bit bit better prepared to get into gory details, but what I just said now is pretty much, I'll just say, we dug into this for quite a long time at the state level for several months this spring. You know, there were some pros and cons both ways. The state's been split over the last year on whether it should or shouldn't count. Gotta say the shouldn't counts, you know, definitely won out on this particular argument. Right, so if you do counseling and that helps with the transition, we'll absolutely still do record that you provided the service. You certainly might count this as a way that you could measure a transition at some level, but again, it's just that hour in and of itself is not part of hours of instruction. Okay, so these are all great questions. You were ready to go with the questions. That's good. So I'm glad that you're making good use of your time and mine. I know I'm sounding sarcastic, but I really do mean that. Okay, thank you, Diana and Veronica. You're providing all sorts of links. So, seeing as how I'm the loudmouth here, I'll just say, hey, look at your chat. Diana's presenting a lot of links, and so is Veronica. Lots of good, you know, picture is worth 1,000 words sort of answers to some of the things that have come up here. Okay, I think we're good. So I'll wait for a high sign from Veronica or Diana, but based on these last few comments, I think we're good and I'm going to sign off. But hey, Veronica and Diana, I'll let you sign my permission slip before I do.
All right, Jay, permission slip is signed. And thank you all very much for for participating in today's webinar, and thank you, Jay, for such great detail and further instructions and clarification. We have posted links to our upcoming webinars that are all around student data reporting. So please be sure to check out next Wednesday's webinar with Martha Perez, and she'll be going over what you all should do to submit your Q4 and end of program year data submissions. And then the following week on July 19th, we'll have the CAEP data reporting changes for 1920 with Neil Kelly, as well as the upcoming in-person regional trainings with Jay and Neil. So please be sure to register for those workshops as well as attend them. This webinar will be uploaded to the California Adult Education website later on this afternoon, and I have posted the URL for that as well. The recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be available. If you all have any questions, please be sure to contact TAP by submitting a support request on our website or shooting us an email, or you can even give us a phone call, and we'll definitely be happy to assist you. Thank you all so much for your participation. Please be sure to complete the evaluation to let Jay know what you thought about today's webinar, and if you have any other additional professional development or technical assistance needs, we do address those needs in that evaluation, so please be sure to fill that out. Thank you all so much for your time and your participation, and have a great afternoon.